That is the reason I asked the leadership of the BBC for this indulgence. President of the Black Business Council, Ntate Monage, the CEO, Tate Matabane, the National Office Bearers of the BBC, Minister Nchabeni, Directors General who are here, past and present, and representatives of the business community, and as we call you, captains of industry, the generous sponsors of this evening's dinner. I'm sorry that I will not have an opportunity to listen to all the others, but it's been a pleasure to hear the accounts that have been articulated here tonight. Guests and ladies and gentlemen, as well as ambassadors or members of the diplomatic corps who are here. It is indeed a pleasure to be here, and it is always an honor to be invited to the annual gala dinner of the BBC. Our relationship as government with the BBC has deepened since the 6th administration took office in 2019, and I think I can say with confidence, it has grown stronger. I'd like to begin by paying tribute to a business legend, Ntate Sam Motsuenyane, who passed away yesterday. He was a pioneer and a visionary. His founding and stewardship of NAFCOC marked a pivotal point in the trajectory of economic transformation in our country. Dr. Motsuenyane's impact was a lasting one, and on behalf of the government and the people of South Africa, I offer my condolences and the condolences of the government to the family, to his peers, and to the Black business community at large. In my inauguration speech 5 years ago, I called on all South Africans to join us as we set our collective sights on a future of growth and economic opportunity. I further called on all of society to mobilize their respective resources and capabilities to make this a reality. The BBC, the men and women in this room tonight, and your membership across the country did not hesitate to answer that call. You have rallied both with us and around us as government in what has been a turbulent period marked by a global pandemic, civil unrest, natural disasters, crises in energy and logistics, a growing gender-based violence pandemic, and slow economic growth that has been further exacerbated by all these challenges that we had to face. We also know that as the 6th administration took office, we were also confronted with the task of rebuilding capacity in key state institutions, practically from the ground up in a number of areas, following the devastation of state capture. What has been immensely encouraging is that the door of engagement has always remained open, and that has made government and the BBC be able to engage on an ongoing basis, in a productive manner, and we have always had a positive spirit of partnership. I'd like to thank the leadership of the BBC for the support you've given us in the sixth administration, I believe we can continue to count on this support for the incoming administration following the national elections in late May. Ndate Monarch, I heard what you said in relation to the outcome of elections. I was listening very carefully. This year we celebrate 30 years of democracy. Just as an aside, when I arrived, the leadership of the BBC took time to brief me. And in the course of the briefing, the president of the BBC also reflected on this period that we've been through. For some moment, I heard him say 30 dirty years. Or he said, dirty years. And I said, did you mean 30 years? And we started reflecting on growing up in Soweto and Katlehong. And we had a bit of a laugh, which has always characterized the way we interact. So this year, as we celebrate this 30 years of democracy, it is time that we reflect on the progress we have made in building a South Africa of equality, human rights, freedom, and mutual prosperity. Of course, it is also time for a sober reflection on the substantial challenges that we face and how we are going to overcome them. The high unemployment rate in our country remains a top-line concern. The energy crisis that we're going through, the challenges in logistics, infrastructure, backlog, crime and corruption, and the effects of poverty and underdevelopment on economic growth are just some of the problems we're having to contend with. Even as we do so and continue to engage on various platforms, I think on just how much the economic landscape has changed over the past 30 years with respect to transformation. In my State of the Nation address earlier this year, I told the story of Tinzwalo, a metaphor of democracy's child. It was a story of how the transformative pro-poor policies and programs introduced under democracy have changed the lives of millions born into freedom. And admittedly, not all lives have been changed in the way that we would have wanted. A story that has not been fully told or explored, and we should think of how we do this both as government and as the BBC. Of BBC Ndate Monarch, as you correctly say, the story does need to be told. It also needs to be written up, as you implore. And the writers should be yourselves, as members of the BBC, because you have experienced what this has been all about, positive or negative, but it needs to be told. And it should also be about how the democratic state, working in partnership with Black business, have pushed the frontiers of economic transformation in our country. This year marks 20 years since the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act was enacted into law. As I left active politics after being Secretary General of the ANC, one of the first tasks I was given by Black business was to lead the Black Economic Empowerment Commission. At that time, you as black business sought to understand what this concept of black business, of black economic empowerment was. And you set up this commission. And the commission did extensive work, consultations, interviews, and research. The outcome of that commission's report led to the enactment of the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act. This act is the singular most significant, far-reaching piece of legislation introduced under democracy to bring about the transformation of the South African economy, and its impact has indeed been considerable. In case you don't remember, you were instrumental as black business in getting this law to be passed. You were not members of parliament yourselves, but your influence and your impact was overarching, and you were able to enable this transformative piece of legislation to be passed. This law, alongside affirmative action legislation and supportive initiatives like the Black Industrialist Program, the worker shareholder schemes, and funding for black entrepreneurs, have enabled fundamental transformation in the economy over the past 30 years. It was indeed the influence and the impact that these laws and initiatives have made a number of these companies that have been reporting here to embark on their various initiatives of empowering black people. Many of them would have continued to be owned, managed, led, just as they were in the past. But your initiative to enable the legislation to be passed paved the way for these transformative initiatives that many corporations have embarked on today. So if nothing else, you should really be applauding yourselves for the impact that you have made. And we in government thank you for the efforts that you have made. Now, during apartheid, a system that we had to confront and to break apart, the prospects for black business, for black entrepreneurs, and for black South Africans in general were bleak, and to a large extent non-existent. The economic landscape was extremely unequal. A small number of white-owned firms exerted significant control over the major sectors of our economy. And new entrants faced barriers to competition, further entrenching the concentration economic power that those firms held. As black South Africans, we were systematically excluded from owning businesses or operating them outside of our townships and rural areas. Access to capital, which still constitutes a major problem till today, or the ability to accumulate capital, was constrained. Laws around land ownership made it impossible for those black businesses who had managed to eke out an existence in the system to expand or to grow or to become sustainable. This led to highly concentrated markets in key economic sectors like chemicals, steel, finance, retail, even mining, which were dominated by a small minority of white-owned firms. Afrikaner capitalism, so-called Volkskapitalisme, skewed the economy even further as the state mobilized the savings of Afrikaner farmers to create a capital base that they used to further entrench white minority business interests. With respect to the workplace, job reservation and lack of meaningful education opportunities closed the door to black professionals in nearly every sector. Dademunare, these are accounts that need to be told, lest we forget where we come from. When South Africa's first democratically elected government took office, it inherited an economic mess, an economy that was in crisis. Over the preceding decade, GDP growth had stagnated at a mere 1.2%. The early 1990s saw our country emerge from a 4-year depression marked by high public and foreign debt. It is undeniable, particularly given the state of the apartheid economy in 1994, coupled with the scale of the market and workplace distortions, we inherited that we are light years away when it comes to economic transformation. Our economy, despite its present challenges, has opened the doors of opportunity for millions of black South Africans and for black business. I like to think of this new frontier we have created together as a galaxy. The transformative economic policies of democracy have birthed stars and leading lights, constellations of interconnected and interdependent black-owned businesses, and indeed supernovas as well. Many are in this room tonight, men and women who are established and respected senior business leaders. They are sitting here with us. CEOs of black-owned companies, both large and small. Heads of listed companies that have grown from humble beginnings. They are not enough, indeed. We need more. And we do need to have a dialogue on how we are going to increase their numbers. Many of us will remember the news stories from the early days of democracy. Being a black person at the helm of one's own business, being a black CEO, a black or female chairperson of a board, this was the headline. This was how decades of professional, personal experience was condensed, because it was a rarity. That this is no longer something prioritized as being of news value in itself speaks volumes about the progress that we have made on our collective journey. And of course, we still marvel and rejoice as some amongst us are lifted to higher levels. There is still a glass ceiling, particularly for black women in our country, but when they break through, we still rejoice. But that ceiling must be broken and shattered so that they can rise. In 1994, total employment stood at 8 million, with black South Africans predominantly in wage employment, while skilled workers, managers, and executives in both public and private sectors were overwhelmingly white. Since 1994, the number of South Africans in employment has increased to 16.7 million in 2023, reflecting a doubling of opportunities and livelihoods for our people. But we know that this is not enough. While unemployment remains a challenge, the proportion of Black South Africans in executive management positions has increased almost fivefold between 1996 and 2016. It was a joy for me to watch my sisters standing here, being top executives in banking and mining companies, and having a great voice in those companies, and not just tokens. And this, for us, is a big achievement, but we need more. The Black Economic Empowerment Commission reports that Black ownership of firms in South Africa has grown from negligible levels in 1994 to approximately 30% of reporting firms today, with Black women's ownership averaging around 14%. The Black Industrialist Program that we initiated in 2016 had an initial target of 100 Black industrialists to be supported and developed. Today, in 2024, we have over 1,700 Black-owned and managed firms across a number of sectors of our economy that are benefiting from this program. Last month, we hosted the second Black Industrialists and Exporters Conference, which brought together more than 1,200 Black-owned Black businesses. And I'm sure the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, who was here, would have told you about this. The conference was an opportunity to reflect on progress made, on challenges encountered, and on steps to be taken to boost Black industrialist development in the next 5 years. These firms are active in the food, agriculture sectors, in clothing and furniture, in cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, high-tech, steel, and creative industries or sectors, amongst others. And these firms have a combined 330 billion rand annual turnover, the type of turnover that did not exist for Black people. And they have created a number of jobs. And these industrialists are investing in capital stock, in machinery, equipment, mobilizing working capital, and bringing the spirit of entrepreneurship to their businesses. More than this, these Black industrialists become role models to young people who see that it can be done. It is possible. Many are exporting to a number of countries. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area holds immense potential in this regard. We will be setting ourselves an ambitious target for expanding trade with our fellow African countries over the next 5 years, leveraging on this African trade area. An area that opens up the entire continent of 1.3 billion people without having, for a number of products, to pay tariffs. This strategic initiative will form the cornerstone of our efforts to deepen economic integration and maximize the benefits of regional trade on our own continent. And so we know much of what has come to the makeup of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area was driven largely by South Africa. And today we have the Secretary General of this free trade area as a young South African who now works out of Ghana. If you ever give awards in the future again, he's one of those that you should really consider. And by so saying, I congratulate in advance those who are going to be awarded some awards. As government, we plan to roll out a program aimed at assisting companies to take advantage of this continental free trade area. And this will include identifying critical markets, products, and value chains. Now, by adopting a nuanced and adaptive strategy, we aim to foster sustainable partnerships and unlock new avenues for trade for our country. Now, at this conference, we also started trying to look at the next 5 years. What we are also pleased to report about is that 11.8 billion in pledges were made by 18 black industrialists to procure goods and services from 55 black industrialists in turn. We're also seeing more black industrialists making pledges at the annual South African Investment Conference. This is all progress. This is transformation. This is change. We will not be swayed to shy away from it or to diminish it. The landscape for black business has fundamentally transformed since 1994. But we also know that the picture is not all rosy. Much more needs and remains to be done if our economy is to enter a phase of transformation, dynamic and inclusive growth. And it is in this regard that the BBC can play, should play, and must play an important role in working with government to make sure that we address all these challenges that lie ahead. Unfortunately, we have a BBC in our country that is creative, innovative, and that does not come forward with complaints, but comes forward with proposals. We are glad that you are oriented in a way of coming up with practical proposals, and you have submitted a number of those to us last year in November, and we are due to hold another engagement, and efforts that we thought would be made effectively stalled a bit. And I've always felt that there was a gap that we needed to fill. And the challenge that you have posed is that you would like to meet, particularly to meet me before the elections, before we even set up a new cabinet. And it was suggested that, wouldn't that be state capture, re-emerging? And I don't think it will be, because you've been playing a very positive role, not a destructive role, and you are partners who are helping us build this country. So it is in this regard that we want to continue working with yourselves, because as we do, we will be able to change the trajectory of our country's economy. Because it is when we focus on investing strategically in the economy and lay the groundwork for prosperity and also for opportunities to keep on increasing. And we now need to raise our gaze and look at new industries that are coming on the horizon. Green economy, offers enormous opportunities to black business. As government, we are prioritizing the production, for instance, of electric vehicles, the green hydrogen production, and the processing of critical minerals essential for battery value chain. And I know that in your summit you also spoke about some of these. And we have, as government, announced a number of incentives that we believe will be beneficial to black business and also lead to greater progress. And in doing so, I do believe that working together is the answer. Now these initiatives that we are embarking on underscore our dedication to promoting economic empowerment, fostering entrepreneurship, and creating a more inclusive and equitable economy. Over the past 30 years, South Africa has undergone deep fundamental and what I believe is irreversible change. It has been tangible and its dividends can be seen, but we need more dividends for many of our people. Now, black business has been a valued partner in this. And we salute you for your solidarity, your positive cooperative spirit in this journey. As we look to the future with optimism, we should continue to work together on the journey towards a fully transformed economy. Now, this approach of working together was repeated this afternoon by President Thabo Mbeki in a seminal speech which he delivered at Freedom Park, where he was reflecting on the 30 years of our democracy. He made a key proposal on how we should move our country forward. He preceded his proposal by giving a thorough analysis of the progress that we have made in the last 30 years, despite the stagnation we've been through since 2008 as a result of exogenous and endogenous factors. And he said, in dealing with this and giving his analysis, the charge that some people make repeatedly, that the last 30 years of our democracy have been a disastrous period for our country and people, is entirely false and serves ignoble purposes. His key message is that at the heart of many of the challenges our country faces lies the brute reality of what he terms as a counter-revolutionary intervention which began some years ago. Whereas the central objective of the counter-revolution was to defeat the progress that we have made, its intervention has caused enormous damage to the country as a whole, he continued to say, and visited much suffering to millions of our people. And he continues to say that he believes that this situation makes it incumbent on our people as a whole to act together to address the harm caused by this intervention. First of all, by answering the question of what is to be done to undo the damage caused by this counter-revolution. He made reference to the speech that I made on Freedom Day when I said, we know that if we work together, if we harness the same spirit of unity that we did in 1994, we will surely overcome our challenges. I continued to say, and he quoted it, history shows us that by working together in pursuit of a common goal, we will succeed. We believe in a better tomorrow, and it is within our hands to shape our collective destiny. He then said, that is President Mbeki, he said, consistent with this approach, he suggests that to respond to the enormous challenges created by those who intervened, our people intervened negatively, that is, through counter-revolutionary interventions. And he said, our people should convene a new and truly inclusive national dialogue to answer the question, what is to be done? Of course, he continues, that national dialogue would be held later this year after the general elections. I'd like to say that I support what President Thabo Mbeki has put forward as a proposal and look forward to working with him and others to engage in serious discussions about a national dialogue. I do believe that we should continue to utilize our tried and tested method of building consensus in our country to overcome our challenges. It has become all too easy to point fingers, to find fault, and to blame. It has become more difficult to build consensus and to work together. And I'm therefore attracted and very supportive to the proposal that he has put forward, because this approach has always worked for us. By doing so, we will be following in the footsteps of our forebears, who always sought to build our nation through engagement and consensus building. I therefore urge the BBC to be part of this process, to take our country to its true destiny. It will be very pleasing if an important organization like the BBC, which has been very impactful, which has been very influential, will be part and at the center of this dialogue. That should happen because we are now at a stage where we now need to put our collective minds together as a nation to chart a way forward. Once we've gone past this season of electioneering and set up the 7th administration, I am confident that together we can put our country on a trajectory of greater success, of more growth, inclusive growth, and where we can have even greater transformation. I thank you.